Lauren, you better wake up. I need a jet plane to take me non-stop. I can't stay in New York City where there is sunshine, sunshine in my country. Hey, customs better be jamming with ecstatic and rock band playing. Everyone happy party, but I'm freezing in Brooklyn. Darling, Lauren, don't cry, I'm leaving. I can't miss this jamming. With all them steel man beating and woman background shaking. If the bug bite you, baby, then you could come and join me in my Calypso Island. Jamming with jamming. Lauren, come on, Lauren, girl, take it easy. Now about me to hold you, baby. The coldness making me shiver. And back home.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. A warm welcome to each of you to Caribbean Connect, a local 2030 Islands informational session aimed at increasing engagement with islands in the region. I am Paula Lewis, the Partnership Manager with the Global Island Partnership, the Co-Secretariat of the 2030 Islands Network. No, I don't mean to start a fight or a war with my Caribbean colleagues, but I am from the most beautiful island in the Caribbean, Grenada, and I will be your MC for today. We appreciate that you have taken the time to join us today, and it is our hope that you would leave knowing a lot more about the Local 2030 Islands Network, who we are, what we do, how we work, and why you should become a member or a partner. Our agenda today includes remarks and overview of the Local 2030 Island Network, benefits of joining the network, and the meat of it, a visualization demonstration of a dashboard to manage the SDGs. There would also be a Q&A, and we would have some closing remarks. Before we get into the meat of this event, I would like to draw your attention to some housekeeping and virtual reminders. This session is being recorded. We're kindly asking that you rename yourself to show your name and island or affiliation, or as we say, show us your flag. Please use the chat box liberally for discussions, comments, and resource sharing, and direct any comments to everyone instead of host or panelists. We will follow the Chatham House rule to support trust-based forum. I would now like to introduce you to our first speaker, our founding steering committee member, Vanessa, who has made this Caribbean Connect possible. Ms. Vanessa Toure will share with us some welcoming remarks. Ms. Toure is the Director of Foreign Economic Cooperation with Curaçao's Ministry of Economic Development. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Paula. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Caribbean Connect, the session that we will be having today with the Local 2030 Island Network. Curaçao is a proud member, a proud founding member of the Local 2030 Island Network. And we joined the network because we saw an opportunity to collaborate with other islands in realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are very comprehensive, sometimes very difficult, and as a small island with lack of capacity, it was very difficult to grasp the whole SDG. So by joining the Local 2030 Island Network, we were able to understand and collaborate and get access to information. And what we will see this afternoon is the monitoring system that I think many islands will make very good use of. The Local 2030 Islands Network is a good platform to stimulate island-to-island cooperation and to also exchange knowledge and solutions to achieve the SDGs. By collaborating and by facilitating local grassroots programs with local support and knowledge, we can help other islands also to realize the same. One such example is the communities of practice sessions that are being facilitated by Local 2030 Island Network. A lot of information will be shared this afternoon, and we look forward to the demonstration of the monitoring system based on the VNR by Grenada. I encourage every island of the Caribbean to join the Local 2030 Island Network, and we will continue reaching out to make sure that each and every island is part of this network, and together as islands we can achieve the SDGs in 2030. I thank you for your participation, and I look forward to engaging, and let us know how we can support and help you to join the network. And if there is any other information that you need, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you. So we'll see each other later at the end of the session.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And also thank you again for bringing us together again today. I will now hand over to our co-chair, Ms. Celeste Connors, CEO of the Hawaii Green Growth Local 2030 Hub, to share an overview of the Local 2030 Islands Network.
Aloha, everybody. It's so wonderful to be with you today. I can't say that I can get in the middle of the Caribbean island contest, but I can certainly say that my island of Oahu, where I had the opportunity to grow up, is by far one of the best islands. I'll just say that. And thank you so much, Vanessa, for everything that you do, and also for your role as a founding member and steering committee member. And I also want to acknowledge our other steering committee members, Spencer Thomas and Bianca Peters, who are on the call with us today as well. But I think the first thing I would want to start out with about the opportunity and what we're doing here, as somebody who, as I said, did myself grow up on an island, was away for many years and had a chance to return to really connect what we are doing at the local level with the global level, which is what this is about, is the peer-to-peer framework. And this is an important point here. We work here in Hawaii on the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is Hawaii's locally and culturally appropriate framework to achieve the SDGs, the Global Sustainable Development Goals. But in fact, I'm also proud to serve on the board of the Global Island Partnership, and you'll hear from the Executive Director, Kate Brown, later, that in fact, the Aloha Plus Challenge was inspired by the Caribbean Challenge. And the Caribbean Challenge, as I understand it, was inspired by the Micronesia Challenge. And now we have a BEST challenge, the European challenge, and all of this really supported by GLISPA. And so really, in fact, the work we do here on our islands in Hawaii was inspired by what everybody is doing in the Caribbean. So I do want to thank you for that, all of your work. And it's a really good indication of what we are here with the Local 2030 Islands Network. It's a peer-to-peer platform to help each other. So nobody really understands best how islands are addressing issues of climate change, sea level rise, increases in catastrophic events than other islanders themselves. And in fact, we're seeing these and experiencing these events more frequently. And this cuts across economic, social, environmental factors. For example, our businesses, our utilities, how are we operating utilities in the context of an island? How are we grappling with the supply chain disruption that occurred as a result of COVID? All of these things, islands are grappling with, and in fact, we probably have opportunities to support and help each other. So this is what we are. We're a peer-to-peer network of islands supporting each other. And in a sense, we are encouraging through our initiative, everybody to adopt an island worldview. One of our former leaders said, we're all islanders on island Earth, so help us help you. Because when we are pushing against planetary boundaries, when we're looking at ways of being more regenerative in our approach to our economic development, who better to turn to for solutions on how to manage that than the individuals that have been grappling with this for all time. So in a sense, I think I'm going to go to a really inspiring picture, and I'm just relying on Laura to move me through the slides of Island Earth. This is our vision. Well, here you can read our mission here, and our vision is a sustainable island Earth inspired by island leadership and values. And the values is really important. I think that we have shared island values. When you grow up in an island, you always know that you might see your auntie or uncle in the supermarket or in your next job. You also need to rely on each other. And that's the most basic resilience strategy. How well do you know your neighbor? And in islands, because of our geography, I think we know each other quite well. Our mission you saw, and now to the principles of how we operate. And this is actually important. Members that have joined have committed to these 4 principles. And it's about political leadership at the heart, and really how this local political leadership can actually identify locally and culturally appropriate goals. What is appropriate to our different communities, and how do those actually serve as models to really addressing what we need to do is achieve the Global Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. The second pillar is the value of public-private partnerships, because we recognize that sustainability and resilience is a long-term value proposition inherently out of sync with short-term political cycles. So how do we develop partnerships that steward the commitment on resilience and sustainability beyond political cycles? And how do we encourage our political leaders that leadership is embracing things that the community has endorsed and actually making it better and achieving your political objectives through that? So public-private partnerships are key. The third pillar is measuring progress. And they say you measure what matters, and what gets measured gets done. And so there's a commitment to transparency and accountability, collective transparency and accountability, because it's civil society, business, and governments that make this collective commitment. And ultimately, how is this all driving concrete action? How are we improving the livelihoods and the lives daily of our community? So I'm going to share with you a little bit of our journey here in Hawaii and how we've applied those 4 pillars. Back in 2014, 1 year prior to the SDGs being agreed at the United Nations, Hawaii made a political commitment that involved all 4 of our mayors, the governor, the state legislature, public and private sector partners, our CEOs, our nonprofit organizations. And I think we might just need to advance the slides too a little bit. I think I'm on the 4 principles still, but I'll let Laura catch up with me on that as I share about this. This is a snapshot. Oh, okay. We'll get the slides back in just a minute. But in a sense, you might recognize some of the people in this photo. And Spencer, I'll do a shout out to you. Our very own Spencer is here in this photo. Former President Ramangasau of Palau was in this picture as well. But these are our statewide leaders in Hawaii, the governor, the congressional legislation, we have our senators here. And what are they doing in this photo? They're actually making a political commitment to the Aloha Plus Challenge as a framework to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And every day they're working around this framework to commit to action, because it's one thing to have a high-level political commitment on energy and climate change, and how do the SDGs and local frameworks such as the Aloha Plus Challenge create that pathway for implementation. And I think if you go to the next photo, you'll see the second pillar is really about partnerships. So what happened is Hawaii Green Growth as a public-private partnership was launched as an initiative coming out of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting, or APEC meeting, in 2011. And at that point, it was about an economic recovery strategy from the 2008 financial crisis. So Hawaii Green Growth was part of this initiative. It's a legacy initiative now celebrating over 10 years of partnerships. And we, as a network with over 150 individuals and institutions that again include our businesses, our government agencies, and also civil society, are stewarding the Aloha Plus Challenge commitment. And we convene annually. We just had our annual meeting last week at the East West Center with over 350 people coming together, 150 youth, because they are our future, and how we are all contributing to what will become Hawaii's second voluntary local review. I should also just stop one moment and say the Local 2030 Islands Network is about island economies. And what does that actually mean? That means that it works at the local, regional, and national level. When Secretary Kerry pledged support for this, or the US government at the COP, he essentially said for the US to put its best foot forward is to put its own islands forward. Hawaii and Guam and Puerto Rico, because that's where the innovation and the solutions are happening. And so in a sense with Hawaii, we are delighted to be able to sit at the table with our other island colleagues from the Caribbean, the Pacific, and other places. And that allows the island economy context allows for this membership. So here we are with the public-private partnership. And third pillar, as I mentioned, and we'll hear more from my colleague Kaimana Bingham, is the dashboard. We're delighted to have an MOU with Esri, which is a leader in ArcGIS and geospatial mapping. We do know that they've been working quite a lot, maybe with many of you in the region, which is quite exciting. We are really pleased with our ability to both capture the data and communicate the data, both in a quantitative and a qualitative way. And what do I mean by that? I think as islanders, we also use storytelling a lot in the way that we communicate. And the Esri-based platform allows for both very clear measurements of the data that we're tracking either through our NDCs, or nationally determined contributions, to our voluntary national reviews, but also to our adaptation strategies and others. But it allows us to actually have a story map, where perhaps a story is in a more appropriate way to communicate progress in our community or a particular challenge. And finally, concrete action. We've heard so many exciting stories of projects that are working in communities in our partnership network. And I think it's the idea of how do we scale those? I think very often it's not necessarily an issue of existing technology or new technologies, but it's the process itself and how we actually build trust. They say that progress moves at the pace of trust. And so this broader global network, as well as the individual partnerships that are part of this network, is really about a trust-based platform that's based on island values. And in that way, we're going to accelerate action on projects including water, energy, food nexus, or water infrastructure, regenerative and sustainable tourism, integrated renewable energy planning, all of these things that our members have indicated are priorities for them. So with that, I'm delighted to end where I started, really highlighting this song sung in rounds and how islands are inspiring each other, supporting each other with support from external partners, but really that it's island driven and determined by islands themselves. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste, for
yes.
Thank you, Celeste, for providing this comprehensive overview. As a reminder to our attendees, we ask you to please share your reflections, questions, and resources in the chat box. I would now like to hand over to our co-chair, Ms. Kate Brown, Executive Director of the Global Island Partnership, to share about the Local 2030 Islands Network membership benefit.
Thanks, Paula, and welcome everyone. I am based in New Zealand, but our other two staff in Glisper are based in the Caribbean. Paula, obviously in Grenada, and Jabal Hassan Ali, who's in Trinidad and Tobago. And I quite commonly am hearing them fighting about who has the best version of different everything in the Caribbean. So I'm kind of getting a lot more into that. I want to talk a little bit. So the Global Island Partnership is one of the co-secretariat of this initiative. And we have actually some of our members are members of this and Glisper, and it's really nice to see. I can see some of our members on this call. So wonderful, welcome. And I think there's some really concrete benefits of being a member of this network. So let's talk a little bit to the MOU that we have with Esri, and we'll hear a little bit more, but we have, and Kaimana will talk to this, but the ability to have support and the platform for developing your own dashboard once you become a member is one of those. If we can move on the next slide. So this network is really focused on a quite specific strategy around how building membership, and I'll talk about why we're trying to do that. The second is focused on helping at least 4 islands go through that whole comprehensive process, including creating their own public-private partnerships, the dashboard, etc. We're also looking at how we do the other conversations around, hang on, the slide has not moved, and let me go to here we are. Thank you. I'll just get this back up. Yes, thanks. So we're working to help at least 4 islands, but more if we can, to create their own partnerships, SDG partnerships, public-private partnerships. We have 3 communities of practice, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the moment, that all have really strong support from various other agencies, including NOAA, NREL, and we'll talk about that. We're developing another one and kind of trying to decide what that will focus on with the input from our members. We're also working on this idea of an island circular economy think and do tank. I'll talk to this next point, which is about joint leadership statements on climate and SDG policy, which are coming from our members, and trying to build a strong network foundation. So if we move to the next slide. In terms of the communities of practice, because we really appreciate, and Celeste talked to this, that islands have a lot of solutions and can share those with each other. So we're trying to create a space where we can facilitate that. We have on this call our communities of practice facilitator, Norman Bath, so he'll talk a little bit later in the discussion. But we've so far had 3 communities of practice meetings. If we move to the next slide. The first one is focused on renewable energy. So its title is Resilient and Clean Energy Systems, and it's really looking to support island economies in achieving clean energy futures. And I think one of our co-supporters of that is actually on this call, which is Mike Callahan from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, who support us with that resilient and clean energy system conversation. We also have a community of practice on data for climate resilience, which is facilitated by Kaimana, who you'll hear from later, and also with support from NOAA and other supporters. And that's looking at how we build capacity to measure progress on local sustainability and climate goals, and it's really the dashboards. So if you're trying to develop a dashboard, that is an excellent space for you to be. And we actually have a meeting of that community of practice tomorrow afternoon if you're interested in learning more. It's set for more of a Pacific time frame, but if you're in the Caribbean, I think it's about 8 o'clock at night, so you can decide. And then finally, we have one on sustainable and regenerative tourism. So that's looking at really how to support island economies to develop regenerative tourism. And that all of these will have meetings in the next month or so. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. And then I think the other way, so that's kind of how peer-to-peer learning will happen in this network. The other way that the network, I think, is really advancing is that we've created these island member meetings. So that's the Leaders +1 meeting in the margins of international meetings. And this one pictured here was actually in Palau during our oceans. And so we had a meeting really where leaders that are part of Local 2030 Islands Network can come and kind of discuss really key issues, offer their solutions, and then we create a joint leadership statement out of that, out of those sessions. So this was our first one, which was hosted by President Whips of Palau and Special Presidential Envoy John Kerry. And then if we move on, our most recent one was in the UN General Assembly, and that one was hosted by Palau, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, and Spec Kerry. We were also there able to welcome a couple of new members, which was Aruba and Guinea-Bissau, and there was some resources announced for supporting in-person gatherings of those communities of practice over the next 2 or 3 years. And so we look forward to having that happen. And then we have some more photos, I think, of some people that might be recognizable in this region. I think that's there. And then, so I think this is a kind of a summary of the action items that came out of the leaders meeting with this whole focus on developing partnerships with universities. There was a very strong conversation around the need to shift to renewable energy and electric vehicles. The issue of climate finance came up, and also climate financing instruments. The pushing for short and medium term actions, was the long term is maybe too late for islands. And then the call for all major economies to reduce their carbon footprints. And so it's an extremely dynamic and interesting conversation that we're just in the first phase of developing, and we'll have another one next year. These will continue to grow, I think, as they're a key element of being part of the membership of this network. And then finally, we have, I believe, 19 members, or maybe 20. We've got some that are just joining from kind of across the world. It's quite diverse, including Ireland or the United States as a member. And there are a few members in the Caribbean, from Curacao, Bonaire and Aruba, Puerto Rico, British Virgin Islands, Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago. So we're already engaging with those, and you'll hear a little bit from Kaimana, an example that has been developed with Grenada of what Grenada's a potential dashboard could look like for Grenada. And then we have a whole range of partners, including US agencies and partnerships and other networks, and we're continuing to develop that. So we're definitely a growing network, and we really encourage people to join. And I'm going to pass now back to Paula and say thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing these benefits. Next, I will introduce Ms. Kaimana Bingham, the Data and Innovation Director for Hawaii Green Growth, Local 2030 Hub, to speak to the energy technology available to all members of the network.
Aloha, everyone. I apologize. I might have to turn my video off. It is raining pretty aggressively here in Maui, where I live, but it's really great because we needed the rain. Parts of Maui have been under a drought, so hopefully I don't break up during my presentation. But I just wanted to say it's my pleasure to be here today and to share with you the Hawaii experience and how we are working together through the Local 2030 Islands Network to implement the 4 principles discussed by Kate and Celeste. And as we have worked through the process of setting up dashboards in Hawaii and Guam, and engaging with our local 2030 island partners, just some background information, we realized that our partners needed to leverage the sometimes painful experiences we went through in getting the process up and running. And so, when we demonstrate the dashboard, it always receives value and positive feedback until the cost factor. So what the Local 2030 Island Network did was secure the data hub in partnership with Esri so that members could stand up their own dashboard initiatives with their own licenses to curate content in a locally appropriate way at no cost to members. Then we realized most of these countries that we work with have baseline data on SDG implementation through various reports to the United Nations. So we worked with Esri and the SDG Data Alliance to create a template that is ready to use as a starting point, which really brings me to the first phase of the dashboard implementation process that I will share in a moment. For broader context, an SDG Data Hub is a platform to support reporting and monitoring progress towards achieving the SDGs and local initiatives. The SDG Data Hub template is comprised of a SDG site, which includes a series of 17 pages and 17 dashboards that can be populated with data related to each of the goals. So this phase one of the dashboard development process includes launching the hub and then populating this dashboard with corresponding data that island economies formally submitted to the United Nations through the United Nations API. And this initial step will create that baseline data from which island economies can build upon, incorporating their national strategic plans, national adaptation strategies, priority areas, as well as community-driven commitments, which I think is very key to island members, island partners. So with that, I am going to showcase the prototype of the phase one dashboard that we were able to stand up with Grenada last week, maybe the week before. My days are getting mixed up. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm just going to go off video. Okay. So what we see on the screen here is a prototype with the template and the baseline data. On your landing page, you have a custom kind of page that you can call it whatever you want, some narrative around what the SDGs are, how to get involved, how to explore the data. Grenada had recently submitted their 2022 VNR. So this is a great opportunity to showcase that report, centralize it in a platform of living data and living systems, and then some narrative around what we're tracking. This is a scorecard that really focuses on priority areas that the region is focusing on. I believe in the VNR report, Grenada had about 8 SDGs that were prioritized as kind of the focus areas. So this could be 17, it could be 3, Hawaii has 6, Guam has 5, but these are really custom to what the VNR and the strategic plans are focusing on, and very much determined by the folks in region. So these are just placeholders right now. You can see there's a tracking mechanism. You can have a definition. These are all fillable, customizable, and determined by region. Of course, then you go into the 17 goals. Each of these open into a page that is populated with geospatial information. We'll look at that. There's an opportunity to do a feature goal, whether that is an SDG goal or a priority area. This is kind of a place to focus on maybe one of the priority areas in region and develop that a little bit more. There's also opportunities to link other initiatives and stories that relate to the SDGs, but might be more localized. So, these are all buttons I created just because the Voluntary National Review mentions the National Sustainable Development Plan. These documents really support the efforts going on in region, and they're clickable. You can read them. They open into a new tab, which is here and here. So you have all of your the important documents linked in one centralized system and one site so that the community can reference it. There's also an opportunity to link any videos, any YouTube, things that are going on in the community, any initiatives that the community would like to be, aware of. So there's just an opportunity to embed that. And then what I think is really neat, and when I spoke with some folks from Grenada last week, Joyce had mentioned that community engagement, right? So when we had our pickle event a few weeks ago as a Local 2030 Island Network, the Lieutenant Governor of Guam mentioned the real value and proposition of the dashboard is it was able to uplift and recognize work that was already being done in the region that he might not be aware of. So this is very, very powerful in identifying folks in the region, nonprofits, public-private partnerships, universities, school groups that are already doing work in the sector that might be able to help identify some gap analysis in the national reporting or the government system approaches. So this is a survey that's open to the public. It lists out the organization name, the name of the project, an impact statement, a description of the project or activity, what organization is the project or activity part of, so that kind of gives a range of partners, and then what type of engagement, and a website to link, the mapping capabilities, where it is. This could be regional, global, local, anywhere. It pre-populates which of the priority areas is the focus of the project or organization, and then start date. And then once this is submitted, it creates a partner map. So it auto generates this where community members, decision makers can see who's doing what in the region and kind of use the tool to do either outreach or to create working groups and to identify organizations who have shared values. So I think that that's really powerful. Again, I haven't populated this because I'm not as well versed in what's happening in Grenada, but I hope to be, and I hope that we are listed as one of the partners who are trying to bring cohesiveness around the work. But that is just, again, pre-populated. It can be custom, and it really uplifts what the community is doing. So that's kind of the landing page, a bit much, but now we'll kind of go into the specific geospatial component of the baseline data. So we'll just pick one SDG. We'll do life below water. And so what these pages open up to do, it gets the geocode of the region. There's narrative of what you're tracking, and it's already pre-populated to align with the SDG targets and the latest reporting year from country level. So we'll look at SDG 14, target 14.5, and then the tracking series, which is EEZs. So this is, again, can be added manually, but this is just from a already provided API. And then you can see here it populates the subsets of islands, and you can click on it and it'll tell you, the EEZ zones, what the scoring is. And then there's a legend to help identify where those kilometers are on the legend. So each of the goals is kind of populated with this already existing dashboard. You can build into it, you can add narrative, you can talk about coral reef projects or beach cleanups, things that maybe aren't tracking against the specific targets, but are supportive in achieving that action. So again, this is very entry level. It's basically a launching point to do with what you like, but for each of these respective SDGs, it's already pre-populated with data that has been supported submit it in region to the United Nations Stats Office. So that is through a global SDG data set. And you can kind of use this as a gap analysis of, okay, maybe we have, we have more reporting years, on this goal. So this one, the latest is 2019. Maybe we can reevaluate, talk to decision makers and see, okay, this is something that we want to focus on because we haven't reported since 2019 and it's going into 2023. So those are some use cases on perhaps how to leverage the existing data and the geospatial information for each of the goals, in addition to identifying gaps where, like I said, maybe going back to that partner map, things that the community are doing that you can uplift and work together to achieve clean energy or, fishery management and marine protected areas. So again, very, very basic initially, but a great launching point where, I think where Hawaii and Guam are a little bit different is we don't have country level data. We are, states and territories that are, and actually Hawaii Green Growth started, right before the SDGs. So we kind of had to come up with our own framework. And I think that that's very valuable. So I'm going to kind of show you what phase 2 looks like. And that's the Aloha Plus Challenge dashboard. And mind you, this has been a 10-year ongoing process. And we've been able to achieve a lot now that I've grown my team, and we've worked really diligently with our governor, our 4 mayors, our Office of Hawaiian Affairs, state legislators, the private sector. But it did take quite a while for all of this convening and everything to come into fruition to really centralize all of this great information onto our dashboard. So ours is the Aloha Plus Challenge. It has our narrative. We incorporated a community calendar, which is also a feature of the template, where we can kind of bring together the community to show what events on what islands are happening as a resource and how to uplift our partners. Very similarly, there's a survey that folks can fill out if they want certain events to be showcased on the community calendar. And then this is our scorecard. Like I said, I think Grenada has a focus area of 8. We have a focus area of 6, and that is clean energy transformation, local food production and consumption, natural resource management, solid waste reduction, smart sustainable communities, green workforce, and education. And within each of our priority areas or goals, we have a primary indicator that tells us how we're doing, tracking our progress, which is, these indicators here. And when you open up to, say we want to look at renewables, it opens to a new page. And this is really where the supplemental data. So we have this one primary indicator. It tells us where we are in our renewable energy generation statewide. We get this from the utility. So we partner with the PUC. We collect this data annually, end of year when the reporting is released. And this is at a glance how we're doing for our goal of 70% renewables. So we're at 39.97%. It tracks our progress. Additionally, we have supplemental information on this page. So again, back to the phase 2 of what's important might not be able to track historically or against time, but we have the renewable energy by source. So that lets our decision makers and our community know, what types of renewable energy are available, their trends over time. When it comes to equity, the prices in Hawaii versus the continental US, that is also supplemental data that's disaggregated. All of these are interactive. And then we're going to go into energy efficiency portfolio savings, and then kind of into some scenario modeling in which we worked with the public utility to really figure out this analysis approach of where we need to be at a baseline versus, the most technical advance to achieve our goals. So this is additional narrative and reporting that we were able to co-develop to kind of show where we would like to go as a call to action. You know, what would be the circumstances to get from where we are to where we need to be, disaggregated by sector, island, and including military, because Hawaii does house a pretty large military base on Oahu and on Hawaii Island. So that, you know, kind of configures into this supplemental data that maybe is not a one-to-one to renewables, but certainly is informational and helpful to the community and decision makers when they're thinking about big picture and strategy of how we need to go in a certain direction. So this is an example of kind of phase 2. And then what I think is really, really neat is that community engagement piece. And how are we working with the community to demonstrate alignment? And I don't know why my computer, I think it timed out, but let me just reload this. But our partner at the Bishop Museum reached out to us and they said, hey, we see what you're doing with the Aloha Challenge, and we want to bring that framework into our own organization and create a linked mechanism for us to show how we're also achieving progress through the Aloha Plus Challenge through our own organization. So we worked with the Bishop Museum, and they had their own initiative where they were able to develop these sustainability dashboards. And it really is transparent and showing how they have are part of a bigger system in monitoring improvement at the community level. So they've logged their power generation costs, they've disaggregated over time, and then they've linked it to the SDG crosswalk and the Aloha Plus Challenge where they're driving impact. So again, it's a really great way to uplift what the community is doing and how it all relates. We all know that as island members, we have to work together to achieve these goals. So that is just one example of phase 2, how we work with the community, in addition to fulfilling all of our data sets and the narrative, but what our own partners are doing to also that are inspired to do this work on their own and link it back to the framework. So I think that is personally very valuable. I might be biased, but that's kind of the phase 1, the phase 2, where we can start as a launching point and then where we hope to go. So I will pause here. I think that we're going to open it up to Q&A, and I hope that you folks do have questions for me, but I'll pass it over to Norman or Paula. Sorry, Paula.
Thank you, Kaimana. I'm sure that was a really great presentation. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. And so now I hand over to Norman, who is, who is our Communities of Practice coordinator for the Local 2030 Islands Network, and he's going to be moderating the Q&A. Norman?
Thanks, Paula. And I want to echo Paula's praise, Kaimana. That is incredible work that you and your team are doing. Very inspiring. So folks, this is a chance for all of you to ask questions or make a comment. And if you could put those in the chat, then I will bring those to our collective panel and collective group of thinkers for a detailed response from either GLISPA or Local 2030 or both. And I will, to help start it off, I'm going to ask the first question, just verbally, which is what technical agencies, experts, subject matter experts are involved with Local 2030 that help support advancing on the SDGs within areas of island interest? And the answer to that, I don't know, I don't want to answer my own question. Maybe I should let Celeste, Kate, or others answer that.
Well, thanks, Norman. I think this is a good opportunity for everybody to get their questions sorted. We're delighted that, as some of the initial supporters of Local 2030 Islands Network included Ireland, actually, which is a founding member, identifying itself also as an island economy, and also the US that committed $9 million to support of initial funding that would also be supporting NOAA our technical agency, and also NREL with the Department of Energy. And specifically those two agencies, and also we are partnering with other US agencies. Part of what we are working to do is create some coherence around different agency engagements in island economies, because it can get confusing. But certainly with the communities of practice, NOAA is providing really excellent support on the data and resilience aspects of the data for climate resilience. And NREL, building on the Low Emissions Development Strategy Global Partnership, which has actually done quite a lot of work in the region, is the other partner that's working to support integrated renewable energy planning. And just a little bit of background on that, when these communities of practice were identified, it was a call, not unlike this call, where the island members participated in a discussion and actually determined what we wanted to focus on. And while clean energy was clearly a focus, we were able to further distill that into something that we wanted to do in the very near term, not to mean that other clean energy issues were not a priority. For integrated renewable energy planning, I think I also speak from experience. Sometimes it's not, again, as I said earlier, not the technology challenge, but really how do all of these different things fit together within the umbrella of SDGs. In Hawaii, for example, we are having a 100% clean energy goal, as well as a doubling local food goal, and we have a housing challenge. And so how do these things fit together? Well, we need not just to have an integrated strategy, but an integrated renewable energy strategy allows us to figure out what renewable energy we put in different places. This came up in our discussion at the UN General Assembly with the Local 2030 Islands Network leaders. A very vibrant discussion actually on different renewable energy technology. So Norman, the answer to that question is the Department of Energy Renewable Energy Lab is actually providing support in that regard. And we're delighted to also be partnering with NOAA and USAID and other US federal agencies at the moment.
Super. That's a great response. And I'm glad we're able to underline that there's a lot of US technical agencies that are involved with Local 2030 and that really bring expert advice, technical knowledge to discussions. And I'm also excited to see questions popping up in the chat. The first one is, how do we communicate the work of Local 2030 and of the dashboard team to folks outside of the room? Is there a preferred way to do that?
I might turn to our Director for Communications, Samantha Happ. I just want to at least acknowledge you, Samantha, on the call, and to note that you have members of the team here. Samantha was most recently working at the United Nations with UNDP on the SIDS strategy. And so as she's getting up to speed, maybe you have an initial discussion, initial response, Samantha, but also Kate might want to weigh in on that too.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you folks. I'll let Kate take over now, but happy to come in later.
Yeah, thank you. So how we communicate this great work. So we finally hired a full-time comms person actually in this network. So thank you, Samantha. But in GLISPA, particularly with the support of Jabal, we've been actively the comms part of Local 2030. And if you mean I think there's two different lots of great work. There's great work that's going on at individual island level. For example, what Hawaii is doing with the Aloha Plus Challenge dashboard, that we've been working to really promote that for at least since 2014 at least in across islands of the world. And that's why we're at this point with this network now, which we launched in 2019, because we really saw the opportunity to try and continue this forward communication effort. And then we've been talking about this in lots of various places, including this is one of the ways that we're going to communicate this. And then through the communities of practice, particularly the data for climate resilience one of the thinkings in that is really about communicating peer to peer about how you actually go through doing something along the lines of what Hawaii's done or where Grenada's going to. So we've got, we have a whole communication strategy. We also have a lot of work going out, and then Hawaii itself is also communicating. So we've got, you know, island level communication, we've got network level communication, and we have a lot of champions that are actively talking about this work outside of where we are. But we really want to do more and uplift it more. And I think that's why we're really excited that Samantha has joined and will help us share more. And as I said, when we are with our active communities of practice, we will start generating a lot of that as well.
Super, Kate. Very, very nice, fulsome discussion. Samantha, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Nothing of substance, just letting folks know that right now I'm sharing different ways to stay abreast of this information in the chat. So our different social media platforms, as well as some different links on the website that will come as soon as I finish talking for you to follow along, including joining our newsletter and other forms of communication. But of course, as many of you know well, communicating amongst islands and amongst yourselves is a very helpful way to spread information. So if there's any ideas that you all have of how to amplify any of this, please do let us know. I'll post my email in the chat as well. Thanks, and over to you, Norman.
Super, thanks. Thank you, Samantha. Here's another sort of two questions, but they might be combined or related. Are we sending alerts to content owners? And is it possible to search the dashboard across data, across countries, document types, SDGs, or organizations who feature in multiple solutions? That sounds like an advanced feature, but maybe Kaimana, do you have any idea, especially about searching data across data sets?
Yeah, so I'll answer both those questions. So for the Aloha was challenged because I work with that and I'm the content owner, and our team is, we do have kind of a back end system that notifies us, you know, when latest reports come out, because we do work at the local level. So that's with our governing agencies, our business members. Most of the data is publicly available. So we have, you know, if it's an annual report, we log when that is available. If it's federal data sets, we do have API capabilities that does it automatically, which is awesome. I would like to do more of that. And then through our partnership, we have over 150 partners. A lot of them do contribute to the data in the dashboard. And I think for about 8 data sets, we work with specific people where we request data updates. I think that it's pretty seamless in the country level data. The API kind of pulls the latest available data from geocode, but for more custom data, that would take a little bit more process driven work, working with partners, working with community members, business folks, universities, things like that to get the data. There is a feature in the Esri technologies called the Living Atlas, where NOAA and other data scientists kind of put out this directory of data that you can search, which is really cool and very helpful. And then the across countries and SDGs, yes, you can actually, I'll link it in the chat for folks to explore different databases where you can explore what other regions are doing. And what type of SDG data is out there. So I will link those things for you, Katrina, in the chat.
Super, thanks, Kaimana. One question for you, follow-up question. What is an API? What does it do?
An application program interface. It pulls, I don't know if that helps. with
But in a
that.
sense, it gets the data automatically without you having to keep track of new
Yes.
data.
The caveat to that is there has to be an API ready database, which isn't always the case, except for really big, databases. Like the federal database is where, they make it API compatible. So not every data set is API friendly, but, for us, for example, census data is very easy to pull because that is an API friendly database. But yes, it is. And then all of the UN data from UN Stats Office is API ready, which is kind of what populated those geospatial dashboards that I demonstrated in the Grenada dashboard. So that part's easy.
Super. Okay, so that's helpful. Let's go to another question, and that is, how do we empower local communities to utilize these projects? That's a heavy, very important, but complicated because it involves the social dimension to this. Does anyone in particular on the Local 2030 or GLISPA team want to address that? Or should I say that maybe this kind of event is part of that empowerment in a way, because all of us here are hearing the value of being able to see the SDGs, the numbers in a concise way, and that can inspire communities. Celeste, maybe?
Yeah, that's great, Norman. I think it's even more, the opportunity is even more explicit. I'd say on one level, building on what Kaimana presented in the phase 1 dashboard, is that through technology, we have the ability to pull from existing data set, particularly from the NDCs and VNRs, I mentioned that. The opportunity is really to take that to the next level and to leverage this, again, this platform, actually, the dashboard, for deeper community engagement. And I shared our experience in Hawaii was actually even the exercise itself to determine what to measure, because again, you say you measure what matters, and we had to figure out what mattered to our community. So it really gave us an entry point to engaging our community in what matters to them, particularly, across these different projects, whether it was a renewable energy project or a watershed infrastructure project. And I think we would probably all have shared experience where projects didn't happen because the community wasn't engaged. So I think part of the value of this is, as you mentioned, it's the process itself, which is going to inherently be focused on community engagement, both maybe as a starting point to determine what metrics and indicators we should track, even the conversation of, do we have data on that? Or if we don't, how do we get data on that? How do we want that information presented? How do we want to communicate what our community is actually focused on? That actually then brings together the discussion and the trust about, okay, now what projects do we want to do together? And so I think it's an iterative process, but community is at the core of this. And the projects themselves, then it becomes a feedback mechanism as well. How has this project succeeded or done well? Are there certain lessons learned that we can rapidly pull from that we can share with others? And that's the whole idea of the communities of practice, recognizing that we have different experts in our communities that will be technical experts on different things, but we can't ever lose sight of the connection to community, but also the connection to our political leadership and how those things come together through the partnership.
Yeah, super. So great response, Celeste, and so true. It's for me, it's another version of the answer is in the room. We just have to come together. Communities have to lead the process, and that is very much part of what is special about Local 2030. Island-led, peer-to-peer approach toward this challenge of climate change. The next question here is a great one. Are there any Local 2030 efforts that focus on the intersection between the SDGs and Indigenous communities? Which I'm also going to throw in the phrase Indigenous knowledge and the valuation of Indigenous knowledge. in this whole process.
I might also just kick that one off, Norman, and then hand it over to Kate and then other colleagues. But the reason why I wanted to just respond to that is because Indigenous knowledge and values is inherent to our entire Aloha Plus challenge. It's actually explicitly foundational to that. And it's because we recognize in the context of Hawaii that we are benefiting from over 1,000 years of Indigenous knowledge and wisdom and sustainable resource management. And that goes back to something we call the ahupua'a, or the watershed, which was a very, very highly sophisticated way of managing resources, water resources. I often say, and I want to create this slide. So next time we have this call, we'll have this slide. If you take the SDGs and you put them on a vertical in a Hawaii watershed, and in Japan, we've heard that referred to as the Satayama. And I think at some point, Vanessa, you're going to educate me on what the water ahupua'a and Satayama is on your island, because we all have ways of designing these systems, which didn't just emerge 20 years ago, right? But all of those SDGs will be in that watershed. And there is a deep cultural connection to that. So we really benefit from having a cultural renaissance here in Hawaii. I think we are seeing more communities, and also in our network where we have those connections, that the Indigenous community can play a key role. But Kate, I want to invite you to just share some of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think, I don't think we specifically have current activities in Local 2030 that are specifically about the intersection on this, other than it's kind of the values that run through everything that we do. So it's the underlying values, and we intersect a lot with Indigenous communities that are doing this type of work and try to uplift that, including a little bit yesterday in something that we did together. So yeah, I mean, it's there. I think we could definitely strengthen it, but we also have within the network lots of examples of that happening at island level, as Celeste just talked about. But I would also like to see how we bring that kind of more to the front, to the fore. And there are efforts, for example, even in the country that I live in, to look at that, and a lot of frustration, I think. So yeah, I think that's a really great question, Stacey, and points us to think about it a little bit more.
Thanks so much, Kate. Folks, let me turn briefly to Titus Antoine from Grenada, who is on island, so to speak, and has potentially an intervention and some thoughts to bring to our attention. Titus? Oh, you're on mute, Titus. Sorry.
I'm sorry, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Pleasant good afternoon to you and the team. Now, I just wanted to interject to say an excellent presentation by Kimana and the others. We are very excited about the tool. We see the great potential, particularly for the community-based organizations and the non-public actors to really take hold of this tool to see exactly where we are, and hold the government accountable, actually. We know that resilience occurs in the field, in the communities, and not at our desks inside the government offices. So we think the persons in the field and so on, they are able to input and manipulate the tool. We can have a really, what should I say, a more whole of society approach to the implementation of the SDGs, and having an honest evaluation as to where exactly we are. So as a government representative in this initiative, I'm very much happy, and we will give all the support to the civil society organizations and so on to get on board and use this tool. I myself am very excited from the government end to see the benefits that can be derived.
Super. Thank you so much, Titus. Great to hear these words of support and engagement from you. Really appreciate that. Looking at the chat a little bit more, I want to mention, another resource in the room, Pacific Disaster Center, proud partner with Hawaiian Green Growth and globally with Local 2030 Island Network partners. That is another piece in the room. And I know there are many, many more here in the room. This interesting message in the chat regarding the Nomads Embassy. It's probably something that we are all living in the Nomads Embassy in some sense, given that it's a digital distributed group of people. I want to turn now to this question from Rick Warner in Charleston. Since SAAS is not free, what is the cost for a coastal community to start this and to operate it? Maybe that's we could start with Kaimana.
Yeah, thanks. And Laura did flag it in the chat, but through the Local 2030 Islands Network, we were able to fundraise and stand up the entire hub for the Local 2030 Islands Network and provide licensing. Right now it's from 2 to 3 licenses per region, which should be helpful. And that's free of charge. And that's something that the Local 2030 Island Network took on, noting that it would be very difficult to stand up the costs individually in each region. So yeah, I hope that answers, but if there's any follow-up, please feel free to link it in the chat or raise your hand.
And then a follow-on comment to that. Thank you, Kaimana, from Laura Com, that there's roughly 2 to 3 licenses per island envisioned. Are there any other elements that folks would like to ask about, or any follow-up remarks that Local 2030 or GLISPA colleagues would like to highlight?
Maybe just one comment, Norman. I mentioned this a couple of times, but it's really member-driven and island-driven. And so even the 3 communities of practice that we're currently working on were determined by our island partners: energy, data for climate resilience, and regenerative and sustainable tourism. And I've been raised knowing that genealogy is very important. And I just, with that, want to acknowledge what actually happened with the Local 2030 Islands Network that Vanessa and Spencer and Bianca know quite well, that pre-COVID we launched and we were ready to go. And then COVID knocked us all sideways. And we had a decision we had to take. Do we just postpone our convening and the clear energy and enthusiasm and the need that our island partners were feeling? And I think the answer came to us from our partners, that we need to connect with each other. We were all experiencing this massive supply chain disruption, tourism disruption. I think once Vanessa, when we spoke, I said, "What's your food security policy?" She's like, "We're driving around giving everybody seeds." And I said, "Hey, that's what we're doing in Hawaii too." And we had this collective, I don't know, Vanessa, you remember that?
Yes, right.
And you know what, we convened virtually, because then we realized, hey, islands are resourceful. We can do this. And we actually convened a virtual COVID platform and a whole series of discussions. And I really hope our team will put that together and into the chat and we all benefit from it. I kid you not. And again, I have a lot of people that can validate this. We had, I think, up to 700 people on a couple of those Zoom calls. And I was already preparing my talking points to explain why Zoom crashed on us, but it didn't, despite the heavy rain, and we had consistently between 400 to 700 islanders connecting with each other, sharing our anxieties, our challenges, and our hopes. And you know what? As a result, we are not going to go back to the way things used to be, and we will demand something different. And this is what the opportunity of this platform presents itself. We are seeing that we want regenerative tourism. we got our islands back in some cases.
Right.
I personally took my kids surfing places that I grew up surfing at, but I couldn't because it had just been changed. I don't know, Vanessa, what, you remember those days?
Yes, and they were very helpful, and it felt like you know, as islands, we are most of the times isolated, and the fact that we were able to get together virtually and share the experience and information gave us the sense that, hey, we are not alone in this. We are all in this together, and we can, you know, support each other and make sure that everybody gets what they need to continue. So it's definitely, it was definitely the best thing we could have done.
And I think the point I was making to you with that, Vanessa, is I was inspired by that. And that's where these initial ideas emerged, right? So they're untapped ideas that all of you will have. One cross-cutting theme is youth engagement. So the reason why, not to go on too much of a tangent, but I'd like the invitation is that we have at least one more community of practice in the near term that we want to establish. And we've heard everything from a youth focus to food security, but also islanders are sometimes those that can bridge to reef land and coastal areas, and that intersection in between the SDGs. So again, I think this conversation, and thanks Vanessa and colleagues for doing that, is so timely, because I think we together should be determining what is most needed in our region, and actually be sharing that and looking for different ways. And I know that we have some of our partners on the call that are with our technical agencies, and really just want to thank them for all of the resources that they bring to the partnership, and also their knowledge of the region and their commitment to islands, because we very much value that. I see we have some partners from NREL on the call. So if you guys have any energy specific questions, you should put Mike Callahan on the spot.
Thanks. Thanks, Celeste. These have been great comments, great interventions, really valuable. I think with that, I'm going to turn it back to our Master of Ceremonies, Paula Lewis. Paula?
Thank you, thank you, Norman, and thank you everyone for your questions, your comments. Please do feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions or comments that we'd be happy to answer. I now turn back to Norman, who is going to close the session with some comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Paula. This has been such a great session here. It's been a super exchange. Just to introduce myself again a little bit, I'm Norman Barth. I'm the Community of Practice Coordinator of Local 2030 Islands Network. We have created 3 communities of practice in response to island countries and islands' expressions of interest. These 3, they've been mentioned already once early in this program, but let me mention them again. Data for climate resilience and dashboards, resilient and clean energy systems, sustainable and regenerative tourism. And as you heard Celeste mention, we're thinking about a 4th one, and there's some great ideas out there, and Celeste certainly has mentioned her latest one here is also very valuable regarding youth. The goal of these communities of practice is not, by the way, to add to your work in the islands. No, the goal is to help you advance on your work through peer learning, peer experiences, and access to expert technical resources and subject matter experts. That includes those at Hawaii Green Growth, at the National Renewable Energy Lab, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we also have great subject matter experts from universities that are connected to Local 2030, who are also resources, both in experience and in more academic thinking about ways forward. In the end, the real power of the Islands Network is you, the islands, and your communities. You know what you need, you know what the situation is on the ground, and you know the way forward. And in that context, I encourage all of you to engage with the Local 2030's communities of practice. And I want to encourage everyone here who's considering membership to join the network. Finally, I want to thank you all for being part of today's Caribbean Connect meeting. Special thanks to Grenada for being the center of today's meeting and the demonstration of their dashboard visualization. Special thanks also to our steering committee member, Vanessa Torre, Director of Foreign Economic Cooperation at the Ministry of Economic Development of Curaçao. Thanks also to the Local 2030 Islands Network Co-Chair and Executive Director of GLISPA, Kate Brown. Also special thanks to our MC, Paula Lewis, Partnerships Manager at GLISPA. Thanks to also behind the scenes, Laura Com, who's the Local 2030 Islands Network Coordinator. Of course, I want to thank Celeste Connors, Local 2030 Islands Network Co-Chair and CEO of Hawaii Green Growth, Local 2030 Hub. And finally, a big thank you to all of you from me to the Local 2030 Data Dashboard team, with a special shout out to Kaimana Bingham, Data and Innovation Director at Hawaii Green Growth Local 2030 Hub. Folks, this has been a really valuable session. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again. I do want to mention that tomorrow, focused on the Pacific time zones, we're going to be having another community of practice for data and resilient data for climate resiliency. We'll be focused around Palau. And then finally, last but not least, I have to give a special thank you to Samantha Happ, who's our communications coordinator. Thanks, Samantha, for guiding us through some of the questions and so forth. With that, folks, this event is ending. I want to thank all of you for attending. We'll be sending you messages about the next community of practice meeting suitable for Caribbean time zones, Caribbean, European, and African time zones in due course. Remember, tomorrow we've got a community of practice meeting for focused on the Pacific time zones. Of course, if you want to stay up late at night in the Caribbean or in Africa, you're welcome to attend and sit in on that one. I think details of when that is can be found on our website. Thanks very much. Take care. Until the next time.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Aloha. Thank you.
Aloha. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Come and join me in my Calypso Island. Jam me on some man woman. Bombadum. 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 My mind is made up. Airport Kennedy would be my next stop. Don't cry and try to convince me, 'cause me suitcase pack already. And if you feel sad and lonely and must fever vibrating your body, just make a quick reservation and touch down in the land of steel pan. Woman, going no cry and leaving. I can't miss this jamming with soul and steel band beating and woman background shaking. If the bug bite you, baby, then you could come and join me in my Calypso Island, jamming with somebody, jamming all stars. Christmas is a high mass. It's real time. We're playing with Jaja. No band fee, neither no whiskey. Just feel free. Every big procession for the first ever Rasta band.